Fear is part of being human, but when it starts running our lives instead of protecting us, it's time to learn how to work with it. And that's what we're talking about today. Welcome to Self-Defence and Personal Safety for Women, the podcast that helps you stay safe, feel strong, and take control of your personal safety, both physically and emotionally. I'm Julie Waite, women's safety advocate and co-founder of Streetwise Defence. And today I'm joined by Sadie Marshall, founder of Take, who supports teams' musculoskeletal health through movement programmes and teaches nervous system regulation and stress management through breathwork and other body-based practices. Before we dive in, a quick favour. If you find this episode helpful, please follow the podcast and leave us a review. It really helps us reach more people who need this support. Let's get started. Thanks for joining us today, Sadie.
Thanks, Julie. It's really nice to be here.
Oh, well, I think it's such an important topic. It really dominates so much of people's lives. And even though it's a natural human emotion, it can very easily get out of balance. So I'm just would like to get your views. I know you've done a lot of work around fear, about why is it so present in modern life?
Yeah, I think there's two things that really stick out to me when I think about fear being so present in modern life. I think we have access to so much information now than any generation before us.
Hmm.
So the range of events that can invoke fear in the body has, just gone extreme to,
Yeah.
what kind of our parents' generation or like my grandma's generation would have been exposed to. I was thinking about this earlier actually about how, previously, like my nan's generation, they would just have their community around them and their life experience would really be based off of the people that they saw every day, their family,
Mm.
and the events would be very community based. And so if a crisis or something happened, sometimes or normally it would happen in community. And
Yeah.
then you would just experience that directly. And then normally you would have the community to also grieve with or be angry with or
Mm.
share that emotion with. So I think that's one thing that now we're not so community based in terms of localized community, that we have access to global news and global communities and global events. And I just don't think our nervous systems were really designed for that level of information. I also think that people are quite disconnected from their bodies. And because fear
Hmm.
shows up in the body and it is a body based experience, if people are disconnected and don't know how to move through it or recognize it, then it's just going to show up everywhere. And so
Mm.
there's like this internal um, phenomenon happening where people are disconnected from their bodies, their nervous systems, and then we have the external that's happening where we're just
Mm.
exposed to so much. So I think those two
Yeah.
together is kind
It's
of
a lot.
yeah.
I mean, I've thought about this as well, and I've had chats with my mum because she'll be watching the news and then she'll say, "Oh, I saw this happen or that happen in another country, and I'm really upset." And which is a natural human emotion to see suffering in another country, other people around the world. But she's someone that really, really takes everything. She takes everything on. She like takes everyone's kind of pain and emotions on.
Yeah.
And I had similar conversation with her, and I just said, we're not designed to take on and to observe all the pain and suffering in the world. Like, the human body can't deal with that. Like you said, if you go back in time, even I often think back right the way back to, kind of caveman time. Your fear is there to keep you safe, but it's kind of out of control in this modern world because we're getting hit from so many sources, like you said,
Yeah.
but then you're on your own to deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's a huge part of it's a huge part of modern life, unfortunately. But it's I think you just, like you said, a lot of people just accept it.
Yeah.
and maybe don't even realize like the signals and things that are happening, and the processes that are going on. So I wonder if you could maybe explain for people like a bit more around the biology of fear and what is actually happening in your body when you feel those emotions.
Yeah. So, fear is an emotion. So, I mean, there's a bit of debate around that in the scientific world, but we're going to disagree.
Yeah.
Fear is an emotion. And so that's therefore it's like energy in motion, right? That's how we can kind
Hmm.
of define an emotion. And it's going to be based off of either your senses or a memory. So either
Hmm.
your sensory system is exposed to an event and your senses will feed back that event into the body and it will trigger a threat reflex. Or you might think of something, a memory, a traumatic memory,
Hmm.
or a stressful memory, and that will again feed back into that threat reflex, which is
Hmm.
located in the amygdala part of the brain. And that threat reflex will then generate symptoms in the body. This is normally the fight, flight, or freeze response. Normally
Hmm.
in freeze, most people freeze or retreat. Um, and then you'll have other symptoms, it could be sweating, heart rate increases, trembling, shaking, um, digestive issues because your
Hmm.
digestion shuts down. Basically, your body just triggers all of the kind of survival mechanisms that you need in that moment to be
Mm.
safe. What's quite interesting is that when the fear response, the threat reflex is activated, the length of time that that kind of activation stays present in your body stays for much longer than the event itself.
Right.
And so this is why, if something happens, like if you maybe walk out into the road and a car goes past and, the car's gone, you're safe, but you could be, shaking for quite a long time. Your heart could be racing for quite a long time. So it's there to keep you safe. But the body's response to fear happens for a prolonged period of time. And if that time lengthens quite a bit, then this is where we steer into trauma in the body.
Right.
So this is kind of how trauma gets to be stored in the body. So yeah, you have that event either from your memory or from your senses that then feeds into the brain. The amygdala, which is the part responsible for the fear response, will then trigger your symptoms. And another symptoms, for example, is your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for like logical and rational thinking. That
Hmm.
really kind of bypasses and it diminishes so that that part of your brain can't really instruct your body to behave rationally. So
Hmm.
that's kind of what happens to the body in simple terms.
Yeah.
When something either happens externally through your senses or when you repeat a memory that's stressful and the same response happens.
Yeah. And it's like you say, it's a very natural response. We all need it to keep us safe.
Mm.
But I know you said then it can be activated by a memory, and then it can also be activated by either a real fear or an imagined fear. So could you talk a bit about that? In that, I'm guessing the mind there isn't distinguishing between whether there's actually something in front of us, like you said, you're about to get knocked down by a car, or you're thinking about something that happened yesterday or last year or 10 years ago, or imagining something that could happen in the future, maybe not even a survival type thing like getting knocked down. It could be worries about your job or your relationship. So it's not really distinguishing between any of those things by the sounds of it.
Yeah, it's not in an intelligent system. It's very generic.
Hmm.
So it doesn't know the difference, as you say, between imagined and real threat. I like to see it as like a very, very sensitive part of the body. So, and it doesn't know what's real, what's not. So any kind of activation whether it's through the memory or through something that you see, it will get activated. The body doesn't know the difference, you know, so the external world will can present you something, or your memory can, but the body goes through the same reaction
Mhm.
basically. And again, you know, it is there for our survival, and I like to see it as feedback. Really, you know,
Mhm.
the journey that I've had with fear is very much, most of the time, it's feedback rather than real. So when I change my mentality to see it as that, because most of the time that fear is generated in my body, I mean, I've been lucky enough that I haven't been put through too many fearful, you know, traumatic experiences in my
Mhm.
life, I guess. Um, I have, of course, had some, but most of the time, yeah, it's not real, and so just learning to see it as feedback, it's telling me something that can be quite helpful.
Mhm. You said you'd had an experience with fear. Is that something you feel comfortable sharing some lessons from, or how you've dealt with it?
Yeah, I think I've always been this sort of person that, you know, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Mm.
Because I feel like every time that I have done something that I'm fearful of, the other side of that is pretty amazing. And I
Mhm.
feel like I just always meet a different part of myself, a new version of myself that didn't exist or that I hadn't connected with
Mm.
before something fearful. So, you know, this could be, I did a skydive, right? In
Oh,
Australia.
wow.
Yeah, that was amazing. That's
Yeah,
more
that is
like
pretty scary.
yeah, that's more like adrenaline, like, you know,
Mm.
and everything. But even at the moment, actually, it's quite interesting. So I've started taking up aerial hoop classes, you know, like the
Oh,
hoop
right.
and you do
Yeah.
like tricks and stuff. And it's so interesting. So there's like a mat below the hoop and you're not,
Mhm.
you know, you're not high up off the ground. But any time that they show us to do a trick where I like have to go upside down or like do something that's a little bit risky,
Yeah.
oh, my body just goes into a complete fear response. And I'm just noticing that my body's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And I can come in and kind of say to my body, it's okay. You're not going to die. Like, you're not going to, but I'm
Yeah.
experiencing all of the symptoms, you know, heart rate, sweating, shaking, freezing. And, you know, really nice that there's other like people there supporting you. Like, you know, you can do it. Like, you're fine. It's all in your
Yeah.
head. But even though I've done a lot of work on fear, it's still so present there. And but then once you do it and once you do the thing and you then come out of the other side of it, you're like, oh, okay, I'm still alive, I'm still here,
Yeah.
like it's okay. And I think the more you can do that, for me anyway, the more you kind of you can kind of befriend fear. You know, you kind of
Yeah.
see it
Yeah.
as like oh, you know, what is it? Who can I be on the other side of this?
Because when you say that, it occurred to me, it's so sensitive, this system that we have.
Mm.
You know, you're describing something there. You've got the mat, you know it's safe, you've seen other people doing it. Rationally, you know it's safe, but your body is like desperately trying to stop you from doing it.
Mm.
And I do think that a lot of people, and I've been like this in the past on occasion, you can kind of get stuck in a comfortable existence because that feeling is it's so unpleasant. Um, and it's like you said, it's trying to kind of pick up on your own signals and realize what they are, and I guess try and like rationally talk yourself round to it. It is difficult even when you know this is going to be good for you. To still be feeling those extreme responses in your body, and they are horrible. I mean, I've always been fearful of public speaking, and to the point where I'd would just avoid it at all costs. Just even the thought of it made me so uncomfortable. And then in a job, I mean, it's a long time ago now, like 15 plus years ago, I started having to do it, and I thought, right, I need to get through this. So I just put myself forward for every speaking thing there was. And then I got to a point where I'd done it that much that I realized I was okay. There was still a low level of nerves, but not to the point where, I couldn't sleep and I felt sick and it was overshadowing everything that I did.
Yeah.
But it is such a sensitive kind of system when you think about it. It's just kind of desperately trying to protect us from anything, even whether it's humiliation, pain, just kind of doing something that's a bit different.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as well, what's quite interesting is that the response and the physiology of what your body actually goes through is pretty much in direct contrast to homeostasis, which is our body's optimal state.
Hmm.
So, what I find quite interesting is that, homeostasis is the body's optimal state. This is when our
Hmm.
blood sugar, our pH levels, our heart rate, our digestion, everything is balanced and at an
Yeah.
optimal state so that we can show up, feel good internally, and also show up in our best capacity. And that, if we're in that state for a prolonged period of time, then we can say that we are going to live longer,
Hmm.
and that actually we are just happier and healthier people for ourselves and for society.
Yeah.
Whereas fear it's an immediate kind of response. But if you're in it for a prolonged period of time, so fear, when it shows up as like an immediate quick response, is healthy.
Hmm.
For reasons we've discussed, it can save us. It can show us maybe where we have blocks or where we're limited. It can give us some adrenaline to,
Yeah.
do something that's healthy. But when it starts being prolonged, you're starting to live in that state instead of homeostasis, which is pretty much direct opposite. And then
Mm.
therefore, this is where illness, chronic stress, disease, depression, mental health, we can go on, will then start to develop because your body is in that less optimal state.
Yeah. You've just reminded me actually of when COVID came about. Um, Obviously, everyone was in a fear state then, and I remember, all the uncertainty. It's a horrendous time for everyone. I was self-employed at the time. All my clients were stopping work. I had no money coming in, and it was just a constant state of fear. The news, everything,
Mm.
and it showed up for me. I didn't realize it until much later in this most horrendous stomach pains.
Mm.
And I had these stomach pains pretty much day and night for about 3 months. And they were to the point where I actually went and tried to get, medical help for it. Not that you wanted to be going to the doctors at that point. You didn't want to go anywhere or do anything, but it was that bad that I thought there's obviously something is wrong with me.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I got much further down the line and I saw a specialist and she said, you've got to relax. You hold in all the tension in your stomach. And that fear was just basically like shutting down my digestive system.
Yeah.
And that was just causing this pain. And I did notice it then that, when I get fearful, like you said, it's about knowing your own kind of signals. I think there's some, like you said, that everyone can feel like the heart rate and all of that. But for me, I was holding tension. I was like clenching my stomach. So I guess it's like kind of, doing the plank 24/7. I was holding my stomach all the time.
Mm.
And even once I knew about it,
Mm.
it took a lot of effort to then kind of keep noticing it over and over and over and over again. Like, okay, you need to relax now. You're doing it again. And you kind of become this part of my life at that time, but it made me ill. It was a
Mm.
horrible experience to go through. And I think if you don't know that, I honestly thought there was something wrong with me, that,
Yeah.
some other random medical thing. I didn't relate it to that.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably a lot of people that are experiencing lots of different symptoms and illnesses, like you said, because they maybe don't realize that it's the fear or the worries or whatever it is they've got going on that is kind of causing that shutdown, because you're not in the state where your body can rest and digest and do all the healing that it needs to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like the stress doesn't cause the illness, but the stress response stops the body from,
Right,
doing
yeah.
the things that it's supposed to do
Yeah,
to prevent your illness. And,
yeah.
I was exactly the same. I had my first and ever and only, and I'm really lucky I've never had it again. But during COVID, I had my first panic attack and
Right.
I called an ambulance.
Right,
And
well, yeah, 'cause it's extreme, isn't it?
I thought I was
Yeah.
having a heart attack. I'd
Mhm.
never had it before, and at this
Mhm.
time I'd actually just finished my yoga teacher training. So I was like, pretty thinking I was pretty calm
You're
and
pretty calm.
pretty relaxed. And yeah, just one night it just came on, and because of so much pressure from the
Mm,
outside. And yeah, I called an ambulance. And when I got to the hospital, I felt really embarrassed because they was like, there's nothing, this could be a panic attack. There's nothing wrong with you.
yeah.
And yeah, I don't think people realize enough that stress, yeah, can just be the trigger for so many other things, and
Mhm.
long-term health and chronic issues. My journey with stress, from the ages of between 18 to about 25, I lived in chronic stress. So I
Right.
didn't know what it felt like in my body to be relaxed. I hadn't
Mm,
experienced that. So therefore, I didn't know what I was missing. I didn't know that there was anything wrong because my baseline was just in the sympathetic state, in the stress response.
right.
And it was actually only when yoga, I started practicing yoga more, and the practice really is aimed to get you in a rested state, that I was
Mhm.
like, oh, what's this feeling that I haven't felt before, in many, many
Gosh.
years. And yeah, that's why I've stuck to the practice, and it's why I do what I do now. But yeah, I think so many people, I know people, family, friends that are living in chronic stress. They
Yeah, I
talk
do.
loud, they walk fast, they're shallow breathing,
Mm,
they're reactive, they don't know how to respond, they react. They haven't got a hold over their emotions. All of these things are a sign of you're living in chronic stress because you can't regulate, you can't see the bigger picture. Your nervous system is wired, really.
mm.
That's what it comes down to.
I mean, I'm just thinking then, if you are in that state, how do you, and that's your normal state and has been for many years, how do you even realize that's what it is? I mean, you said you found the yoga, but um, have you got any suggestions for people that might just be listening, thinking, "Oh, that might be me."
Yeah. I mean, I am gonna push yoga because that is my journey,
Mhm.
and that's what I teach. And I think it's such a holistic practice. There's so many different styles as well. So I would say if you go to one yoga class and you don't like that, try another. There's like loads of different styles that you can try. Obviously, breathing and meditation, which kind of all forms under yoga anyway. But going out in nature,
Mm,
taking yourself away on holiday, like maybe like a weekend of like no phones, no screens, no technology, but getting yourself in nature, in like a natural lake, in water. Water is really healing for the body.
mhm.
Just getting into going back to basics, it's really not that complex. I think like with so many modalities out there at the moment, in terms of like healing and well-being, people can get quite overwhelmed with what should I be doing? What I do and what I teach people, come back to your body, come back to your breath, and come back to your natural state. And once
Mhm.
you do that, then everything else kind of falls into place. Um,
Yeah.
I think if anyone's listening to this and they're like, oh, I may be living in chronic stress, look up the term homeostasis, recognize what homeostasis is and consider if you live in that state or if you're
Mhm.
living in another state. And then, yeah, just bring it back to basics: body, movement, breath, nutrition, environment, all of these things, connection, authentic human connection. People
Yeah.
are quite lonely at the moment. There's also been quite interesting studies about how like authentic human connection can actually reduce that threat reflex that we spoke about. So if
Right.
you have like community and like real human connection, then that can just help reduce the part of your brain that's responsible for that threat reflex. So yeah, all of
Yeah.
those things, I'm not saying anything, groundbreaking here. It's all quite simple and back to basics. But I think
Mm.
for me anyway, when I'm overwhelmed or when I've been working too hard or when I've been on my phone too long, it's like, okay, bring it back to basics now. Is my diet okay? Am I getting enough sleep? Have I spent time with friends? Have I experienced joy? Have you got any
Yeah.
hobbies that actually make you happy? We're not just supposed to wake up and work and go to sleep. Like, we're here
Mm.
to experience life. Do you have anything that brings you joy? And if you don't, think back to when you was a child. What did you enjoy? I think this is the
Mm.
reason why I found aerial hoop recently, because
Yeah.
I used to do, when I was younger, I used to love performing and like, dancing and being kind of showgirly,
Yeah.
the outfits and stuff. And so, yeah, because I've been working really hard the past few years, building my business and everything, I was like, do you know what? There's nothing in my diary like that is scheduled for joy. And I need to
Yeah.
schedule some joy in my life. And so I'm definitely a beginner. I've got bruises everywhere. I'm not very good, but it brings me so much joy. Like, I
Yeah.
literally, when I leave, I'm like buzzing, I'm like, oh my God, I feel so alive right now. And it's honestly been one of the best things I could have done for my well-being recently. So yeah, joy, find joy.
Oh, definitely. I think it's like as humans, we've forgotten what it's all about.
Mm,
And separate discussion is there's a lot of programming, there's a lot of control in our society. The powers that be want people to do certain things. They want people to go to work, they want people to conform, they want people to consume. And actually fear is the biggest motivator for consuming, because you feel fearful, you feel stressed, and what do? You go out and you get some chocolate, you get a bottle of wine,
mm.
you go and buy yourself something nice to make you feel good. And it might sound a bit skeptical, but that's what the basis of pretty much all marketing and selling is built on. You're either selling a fear or you're selling some sort of like passion or enjoyment.
Yeah.
But along the way, like you said there, we've forgotten what it means to be just a human being. And we've made everything so complicated. And I try and remember sometimes, like I said to my kids just recently, because they were arguing about phones and social media, and just like I'm constantly like tracking them down, getting the phones off them. It's like a constant battle. And I'd said to them, like, we are just animals. Humans are just animals. And you need to like eat, sleep, make the next generation, survive. But we've made it so complicated for ourselves. And now we think that we have to go on social media and be better than someone else or compare ourselves to someone. We have to, watching endless like random videos or scary things. But like you said, if you can strip all that back and just come like back to nature, back to what you're eating, seeing people, doing something you enjoy, it can really make the difference in how you feel. But you have to be really disciplined in doing that. And I know from my own journey in trying to do this, you kind of set off with an intention. Right, I'm going to take things, I've already done it this year. I'm going to take things much slower this year. I'm going to calm down. I'm going to take more time for me. And then all of a sudden you're flapping around trying to sort out kids, family, work, everything.
Yeah.
And all the time and things that you've put in for yourself have gone out the window. So you've got to try and be disciplined with it, I think. And like you said, I think finding a class or scheduling something, a yoga class or a fun class, like you said, is a good way, because you've kind of made a commitment there to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just accepting that, our nervous systems have been building since we were babies. So our
Mm.
nervous system is shaped by our environment, by our systems. And if, for me, for example, when I was in the kind of early 20s leading into it, my nervous system was comfortable in stress. So
Mm.
therefore, when I got myself out of stress, my nervous system was like, no, 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 go back to stress because that's comfortable.
Right.
Actually feeling rested wasn't comfortable because it wasn't
Mhm.
known. My nervous system hadn't got used to that. And so I think people need to understand, first of all, where's your baseline? What is your baseline? What is the state of your nervous system, first of all? And then start to train it into the way that you want it to be. So, I've been practicing yoga for 11 years. And honestly, it wasn't really until like I started to become like more like a daily habit that I
Mhm.
really started to train my nervous system to be in a different state. And your nervous system just has to be trained. You have to
Right.
really do the practices, do whatever, like we spoke about, and just understand that if you have been living in chronic stress, then that is going to feel way more comfortable initially at the beginning
Mm.
than feeling rested and feeling at peace. And you have to just keep putting yourself back into it so that over time, the stress then becomes, oh, I don't want to feel that anymore. I want to go back to the peace that I've
Yeah.
been cultivating, so that when something like fear or the threat reflex happens in the body, it's no longer your baseline. It's no longer something that you're used to. It's something that,
Mhm.
oh, that's not comfortable for me. I want to get myself out of it. And I think maybe the
Yeah.
reason so many people live in fear for so long is because they're just so comfortable there. And they
Mm.
haven't trained their body to feel something else.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think for women especially, it's hard to rest. And, if you're living in fear or stress, like you said, you have to find a way for your body to come back to that calm state. And I'm terrible at this. I'm trying to get better, but just finding it so hard to rest because whenever I rest, I feel guilty that I'm not doing something.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's so many people think this. And it's training yourself because you've trained yourself or you've been trained or whatever to be constantly, meeting other people's needs, doing the house, doing the meal, do whatever it is.
Mm.
And then if you're not doing that, it feels so alien to you. It was a real effort to make yourself stop and kind of question, right? Do I need to go and do this cleaning and these jobs and these things now? Or could I take an hour? I love reading. Could I take an hour in the middle of the afternoon on a weekend and go and sit and read? Well, that's like unheard of for me because I'm normally like shepherding kids around or trying to catch up with jobs or whatever. And I've started trying to do that. And it feels very weird, but I notice it and I notice the benefits because I wear this Aura ring.
Yes.
So this is, like your smart watch or whatever. Um, and I hardly ever, it tells you like periods of stress during the day, periods of rest. I hardly ever get periods of rest in the day
Mm.
unless I'll go and sit and read. Even if I watch TV or other things like that,
Yeah.
I don't fully rest.
No.
So that I know for me, that's my way of fully resting.
Yeah.
But even then, still feel guilty for doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly like you say. And, women, we are, naturally, most of us innately caregivers. We care. We want
Hmm.
to make sure our children, our family, our mothers, our sisters, our friends are
Mm.
there. And we're pretty much, if someone comes to you, you'll be there. I think boundaries is a word that, we,
Yes.
we all
Yeah.
need to learn. And, just thinking about my mum and sort of her generation, the idea of self-love is
Mm.
probably non-existent. This is a pretty new term that's kind of been fed in for sort of our generation and the
Mhm.
generation before. But yeah, the idea of filling your cup up first is a bit like, oh no, that's not very comfortable. That's not the way. And I think as well, like again, if we're looking back through kind of an evolution point of view, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time, women back then they had more time because they
Mm.
didn't work, and so they could be the caregivers, and so that's why that kind of ideology has been passed down to us. But now women nowadays, we haven't got the luxury of just staying at home and
Mm.
cooking and cleaning and being there for the family. We have to do the career and we have to do the everything else. And so yeah, we can't do it all. And I just think, like, I say this, like, my best friend, she's a single mum and she has a really demanding job. And I just say to her, you will be a better mum and you will be
Mm,
better at your job when you are full. When you are stressed and when you are low mood, your children feel that, your partner feels that, your work will feel it. So
mm,
this idea that we should just keep pushing and not rest, it's false. It's not true.
yeah.
It's something we have to actively unlearn. It's not just going to happen. We have to
Mm,
actively put ourselves in rest, in state. We have to actually actively talk to our family and partners and children to teach them, no, I'm doing this right now. Teach them that it's okay to set boundaries. Say to your partner, I need your support right now because I'm going to go to the park and I'm going to read for half an hour and I'm not going
yeah.
to bring my phone. And your body is going to be like, no, 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 don't do that. I can't do that. And, this is where self responsibility and willpower and just the knowing, the inner knowing of on the other side of that, I'm going to be a better person. That's where that kind of comes in.
Yeah. And if someone's listening thinking, okay, right, I'm going to try something, and I know you'd said about yoga. I know there's lots of different types of yoga, like you said. What's a nice, gentle, um, you know, uh, introduction to yoga so that, if you've never done anything like that before, or you're not feeling particularly flexible and you don't want to feel like you're competing with anyone else in the class, that you can go along and just kind of ease into it.
Yeah.
What would you recommend for people?
So one of my favorite styles of yoga is yin yoga it's called. And
Right,
it's not completely comfortable because you're holding stretches for like 3 minutes at a time. But what's
right.
really, really impactful about yin yoga is that when you hold their stretch for that length of time, the pressure of the stretch and the release of the stretch goes all the way down to our fascia, which is kind of located in like the connective tissue part of our bodies.
Hmm.
And this is where like really old energy and old stress and sometimes trauma can be stored. So normally if you like
Right,
go for a stretch, and you just hold it for 30 seconds or a minute, it's going to go straight to the major muscle group. In yin yoga, when you hold particular stretches, the stretches are normally done like lying down as well. Like there's no standing positions. And you normally have
right.
like a blanket and some blocks and some bolsters so that you kind of feel comfortable in the stretch.
Hmm.
And honestly, it's just feeling that release afterwards. Like it really, you really understand the mind body connection when you've had that session of yoga, because once you get the release internally, the
Hmm.
mind is just, so much space has been created, so much clarity, so much space. Because when we create space internally through our muscles, through our fascia, then that has a direct impact on your mind and how your mind operates. So yin yoga is great. There's also yoga nidra, right, which is just lying down.
Right,
This is probably one of my favorite styles of yoga now. However, I will just say when I first started yoga, that would have been my worst nightmare, because lying down and being still with my thoughts as a
right,
20-year-old, at that time, I didn't know emotional intelligence. I didn't know self-regulation, and I hadn't really learnt to sit with myself. So at that time, I would say if you have like a very heavy mind and you struggle to sit and just be with
right.
yourself, I would go for a much more active, rocket or vinyasa or hatha style of yoga, because what that aims to do is kind of put your body through a bit of an intense workout so that when you get to the end of the practice, you can then relax. Um,
Right,
so it really depends on your type. If you're like a really busy professional and you're like constant, and you just feel like you need to rest and relax, yoga nidra or yin yoga is the slow restorative type yogas. If you feel like you can't sit still, that you don't really feel comfortable sitting with your mind or your body, then you might want to go for a more hatha, rocket or vinyasa style yoga, put your body through a bit of, sweat and a workout, and then that will then help you feel relaxed afterwards.
Yeah, because sometimes you need that kind of movement and energy at the beginning then to be able to relax
Exactly.
afterwards, don't you?
Yeah, fully
I quite like the
agree.
sound of yin. I've never done yin yoga. I like the sound of what you said about releasing as well, because I think most people in this day and age have traumas, stresses, and things that have experiences they've had in their lives that we probably haven't released properly. I know I've certainly got things, and you do a bit of work on them, but the body does store it. And I do like the idea of that as well.
Yeah.
Um, if there's people that have, they've experienced something and they've got the trauma, I'm guessing that their levels of fear can be, or their fear response can be, much heightened. Um, have you got thoughts around people that have experienced traumas and what kind of practices or what they can do to help with that?
Yeah. So our traumas are really ours and they're really personal. So it really depends on what they've been through. But obviously, if someone has a trauma and they're exposed to something that can trigger that trauma. So if, for
Mhm.
example, someone walked down the street and their bag got snatched, it could be anything from, walking down that same street again, or it could be, if they ate Chinese food that night, maybe they never eat Chinese
Right.
food again. There could be so many things that someone associates with that trauma that could trigger
Mhm.
the trauma. So this is when we say about the fear response being quite generic. It can be a trigger from like a very like acute situation that took place. So
Mhm.
something like, yeah, someone taking your bag and just running off, that's quite an acute situation. Or people can have trauma from like prolonged exposure to stress and
Mhm.
trauma. So this could be like a dysfunctional marriage or an unhealthy marriage or family dynamics.
Mhm.
This is why it's so broad in terms of what it can capture. But in terms of the support and the help out there, obviously sort of talking therapies and narrative based therapies have been shown to be really, really effective in this area. And there's quite a specific process that the therapist or the clinician will go through. So this could be like CBT, for example, or kind of
Mhm.
other based narrative type therapies where they'll get the individual to talk about the traumatic event and sort of really go into quite a lot of detail about what happened, and just to like repeat the narrative, just keep talking about it and talking about it so that you kind of become bored by it, that you kind of have
Mhm.
normalized whatever happened. And then the process is then finding a positive in that situation, and then once you find the positive in the situation, then it's really important to link that positive back to the traumatic event. And that kind
Mhm.
of completes the healing cycle. And it has to go in that order as well. So if we just take the example of like the woman that got, her bag snatched, she could have like, ate some Chinese food, gone to got her bag snatched, was walking home, and then now she doesn't take that route anymore. She doesn't eat Chinese food and she no longer wears a bag, right, going out.
Mhm.
She also stopped going out as much and she's at home and she's taken up fantasy books that she enjoys, right?
Mhm.
So the process could be that you talk through the event, you go into specific details, allow the body to normalize it, allow the body to talk about the event without going into that stress response. Then the
Mhm.
positive could be, well, I don't eat like bad Chinese food anymore, so I've become healthier in what I eat. I've also taken up fantasy books, which I really enjoy. And, I've met some new friends, or I'm part of a book club that does that. And now I can walk back down that street despite the trauma happened, knowing the
Yeah.
trauma happened, but I'm able to do that. So you have like a sense of reward that comes out of, the traumatic event. It's kind of like
Hmm.
knowing that you've come out the other side, and the body needs to have that reward element, the linking back to the
Yeah.
traumatic event in order to kind of heal the cycle. So that
So you're not just burying it away. You're not just burying it away and trying to not think about it. Because
yeah,
sometimes when you try not to think about something, that thing just gets bigger and bigger and bigger then till it
yeah.
looms over you.
And you're not also just replacing it with a positive thought. Like, you're not like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that happened, but, I'm part of this book club now." It's like, "Okay, but then how can we link it back to the
Hmm.
traumatic event?" So I guess it's association, right? So that your brain doesn't associate it with the trauma
Yeah.
anymore, that it associates it with the present moment, with who you are now. Because that's not real anymore. That's in the past, but let's focus on who you are now. So that's really good therapies. I would say, like, if people do notice symptoms that, you don't do a certain thing, or you avoid a place, or you avoid people, or you avoid a certain thing because you have this like uneasy feeling, that could
Hmm.
be a sign that there is maybe a trauma related to that. And so many people have like suppressed trauma or like suppressed memories that they wouldn't even know. So they might not remember the event, but they might have the symptoms. And
Mm.
this is where, support from a therapist, is really, really important to kind of guide them back to the event, get to the root of it, and then go through the cycle of healing. Uh,
Yeah.
and then we have things like EMDR, which is like the eye sort of therapy, where you kind of move your eyes like that, like really fast from side to side, and then you relay the traumatic event. And I don't really know the ins and outs of what's going on, but it's supposed to allow your brain to kind of process it. Or I think it actually has to do with the amygdala, the threat response, that the eye movement reduces it. And if that
Hmm.
associates with the memory, then that's how that helps. But from my understanding of what I've read about EMDR, I haven't had any direct experience with that type of therapy before, but it's more kind of appropriate for acute traumatic experiences rather than prolonged traumatic experiences. And then I
Hmm.
guess the therapies that I would be most interested in are kind of physical therapies. So like shaking the body, we know that this is what animals do in the wild when they
Yeah.
exposed themselves to something traumatic or stressful. Just shaking the body. Again, I would definitely look into, this is a particular style of therapy, and it should be done guided and with the support. I mean, shaking just generally can be good to just like regulate your nerves,
Yeah. Yeah.
get it out. But if you're doing it for a specific trauma healing, having someone guide you there, because I've done it myself through different modalities. And yeah, when it comes through the body, it can be a real tears, shaking. It can be a very physical experience.
Mm.
So having support and guidance is really important.
And so, are there any other practical things that people can do to help them, like build resilience and get out of this fear response and into that more calmer body and mind?
Yeah, I think just, really taking responsibility for what you're feeding into your body. And,
Mm.
that really kind of self responsibility is so important. When it comes to, for example, how much screen time you have, or if you're watching the news or the media, understanding that the human psychology, we have like a negative bias. And this basically means that we react more and we click more on things that have negative headlines. There's been loads of data and studies about this, but articles with like more negative words will get more clicks and people will go more into
Mm.
that. Because again, it's a survival mechanism, compared to if they were told positive news, people have a higher reaction to if they hear negative news. So just understanding that the media, that social media, they are businesses, they are there to make
Mm.
money, and they can be used in a really amazing way and for entertainment and for connection. But it is your responsibility to choose who you are following, what accounts you are engaging in, what news you are listening to.
Mm,
I personally don't watch the news anymore.
yeah.
I think you're the same, after COVID.
Watch it, not since COVID. I completely stopped.
Yeah,
And I'll turn it down actually. So like if we're in the car and we've got the radio on, I turn it down and I'll say to the kids, I mean they're used to it now because I've done it for like 5 years, but I'll say to them, we don't need to hear that.
yeah,
If I want to find out about something, I'll go and find out about it. I don't want to hear, 3 headlines of doom
yeah,
and maybe they throw in one positive news article at the end. That's not what the world is
yeah,
like. It's giving you an unbalanced view.
yeah,
But there's not. People think I'm a bit weird when I tell them I literally do not watch the news
right,
at all
yeah,
or listen.
yeah.
But I don't care. I feel a lot better since.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. When I tell my family I don't watch the news, it's just like, it's so unheard of because it's such
Mhm.
a for us anyway. Like I remember, like of growing up at home, we would watch the news at 12, at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
and at 10 p.m. We would
Mhm.
actually call it 10 o'clock tea, with it would be a social gathering, where we would
Yeah.
have our tea, maybe have a sandwich and watch the news. And that was just, I think that's a normal part of family life. And I think when you actually realize, oh, I'm actually an autonomous being and I can choose what I feed into
Mhm.
my body, it's scary again at first because it's not used to. You've been conditioned to live and take in things for many, many years. But when you just actively go and choose what you're feeding in, then your life drastically begins to change, And I think you have to put
Mm.
yourself in environments, if you have a fear, for example, of men, do you have
Mm.
any healthy male friends or role models? Or like, are you putting yourself in the company of men that are healthy to show you that there is a
Yeah.
different way? Are you following healthy masculine men online, or are you just seeing, you know, the
Yeah.
unhealthy side of it? So I think we just really have to take that self
Mm.
responsibility and really seek out because if we just sit back and don't do anything, then the things that we're being fed are going to be harmful to us. We have to actively
Yeah.
choose to either not engage, but then also replace it with something else. Because when we have space, that space wants to be filled. So if you just stop
Yeah.
watching the news, your body's going to just naturally, and don't fill it with anything else, the body's going to just be like, oh, I want to watch the news again. Whereas if you replace it with
Mm.
something else, then you're changing the habit.
Yeah, definitely. And there is, you know, many years ago, like going back like 20 years, I worked in PR and I worked briefly in like policy. So I went along to things like the, political party conferences. I worked with journalists and everything is so twisted and there is an agenda for everything. And you know, the, all of these things that we see coming through, whether it's, the immigration, whether it's men versus women, it's all there always has to be someone against something
Mm.
because there has to be that kind of level of fear, and then you can get people to do what you want. And I just think when you kind of know that and almost like keep reminding yourself of that, it makes you feel much more powerful because my day isn't going to be thrown off
Yeah,
because of a headline that's meant to get everyone against, whatever is going on,
yeah,
immigrants or whatever topic of the day it is.
yeah,
I'm not having my entire day thrown off for that.
yeah,
I'm not going to have like fear and panic and, no, I'm focused on my day, my life, the family, the things that I want to do. And it's very powerful when you do that and you give yourself permission. Like, I don't need to engage in all this stuff anymore. I don't need to scroll through the things. I can unfollow these accounts, whatever it is that makes you feel uncomfortable, and like you say, replace it with something else.
yeah,
Replace it with some nature or some positive news or, something funny. Like we don't laugh enough as humans, I don't think these days. So something that makes you laugh, rather than thinking you have to go down this route that we've always gone down of, oh, we have to watch the news, I have to be informed, I have to know what's going on. Well, you will be informed one way or another. I've not watched the news in 5 years, and people tell me when stuff's going on,
Yeah.
and I am on social media, so I do see things just inadvertently, but I've not suffered from not knowing what policy and what politician and who said what.
Yeah.
So you just have to kind of, like you said, self-responsibility, isn't it? And just like empowering yourself, I think.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, that powerful feeling, there's nothing quite like it.
Mm,
Knowing that
mm,
when I, walk into a room, or if I go down to, if I go and see my nan or my family and they're talking about something that's quite stressful, I'm just like, I I'm not stressed right now.
mm,
I don't have that response to that because I'm not engaging with it, and I don't want to engage with it. So it's, yeah, once
mm.
you get past the uncomfortable feeling and,
Yeah.
being okay with it being misunderstood a little bit, then
Yeah.
it's,
People thinking you're a weirdo.
yeah, basically.
Okay, and what I thought, how we could finish up. I think there's a lot for people to kind of think through like maybe step back and do a bit of self-analysis and just stop and think, right, okay, what am I fearful of? What state am I in most of the time, some of the time? How am I reacting to things? There's lots of questions for people to go through there. I'm going to just ask in a minute if you could maybe do a breathwork practice with us and give people maybe 3 top takeaways that they can do. Before we do that, could you just tell us a little bit about what you do and where people can find you? I know you go into businesses and work with the employees to help them with their well-being. So if people are interested in that and other things that you do, could you give us a bit of an overview?
Yeah, of course. So I am the co-founder of Take a Pause, and this was really created because I spent many, many years stressed at work, and then I would leave work and do yoga and feel not stressed. And then over
Hmm.
time, I thought, oh, something's wrong here. It shouldn't be that I have to leave work to find peace and calm in my mind and body. So we've created programs, we do workshops, we also do day retreats that is all about what I've spoken about today, bringing people back to the basics, bringing them back to their body, teaching them how to regulate their nervous systems, very simple, basic movements to move stress and pressure out of the body. We weren't made to sit for 7 hours at a day. That's not what makes the body, optimal. I'm just looking for ways to make the body optimal, to make the mind optimal in like really accessible ways. So bringing that into the workplace, creating out and carving time in the working day for people to move, breathe, rest, so that they can learn that feeling, right, of what we was talking about, so that they can learn what homeostasis is and what safety and rest feels like in their body throughout the day, so that
Mm.
hopefully they can train it to become more normal for themselves, and they can show up better at work, but they can also show up better, for their families and friends.
Oh, that sounds great because you spend so much time at work that if that time when you're at work, you're in a stressed state, that's going to impact you. Even if you are able to then go and calm down at home,
Yeah.
it's going to impact you, and it's going to impact the workplace as well because you're not going to be as productive. You're not going to have as many ideas, be as creative. So I think, there's benefits for the employees, but also for the employer as well there when you've got a calm, happy, um, motivated workforce, everyone's going to be more productive. So, and where can people find you? What's your website?
Yeah, so takeapause.co.uk is my website.
Hmm.
I'm also on LinkedIn, just my personal account, where I share lots of stuff on there. And on Instagram, we have an account, Tap Wellbeing. And
Okay.
that's where you can find me. Yeah,
Oh, great. Well, I'll link those below.
perfect.
So before we finish, what would you say to people, 3 things that they can take away from today?
I think the first really important thing is understanding that our body's natural state is homeostasis, and that
Hmm.
we have a state that is available and accessible to us. if we seek it, that is
Hmm.
optimal, that is rested, that is at peace. If you're not familiar with the term, I would say just do a bit of digging, looking into it, and find practices, find environments, make sure you're surrounded by people, make sure your work environment, all of the things in your life ultimately can complement that state and hopefully keep you in that state. So that is our natural state. It is our optimal state, and we all deserve to feel like it. I genuinely believe.
Yeah.
The second one I would say is find your breath. I know we're going to do some breathing now, but
Okay.
this is one of the biggest game changers. Coming back to that self responsibility, we can all control our breath at any given moment. It is a hidden
Hmm.
superpower that we haven't even explored fully yet. Any given moment, whether you're in a conversation with someone, whether you're out on the street, whether you're driving or commuting, you can alter your breath to change your internal state. So if you haven't built a relationship or a connection with your breath, I would definitely start that.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
the final one is, seek support, community, therapy, coaches, this journey of, self improvement, self development, moving through fears and traumas. You don't have to walk it alone. There is so
Mm.
much information out there that I think it's really important to have personalized support in this day and age.
Mm.
And for me, anyway, when it comes to my own self development and growth, I've had 3 different therapists, I've worked with 2 different coaches. And every time that I work with these people, I come out the other side just completely different and changed and altered. And, we are sensitive beings. We feel a lot.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with you. Our senses and our nervous system, it's how we're made. So
Hmm.
getting that support, getting that, knowing that you're not alone, I think is really important.
Oh, that's great. That's really, really good advice. And then I'd just echo that to say, yeah, there's nothing wrong with getting therapy. I do. I don't know if there's still a stigma attached to it. I think certain types, certain elements of society might think so. But, I've had therapies as well. I've had talking therapies. I've done tapping therapy. I've done a bit of EMDR as well,
Yeah,
and it all helps.
yeah.
But then you just kind of get stuck back in your daily life and you forget a bit,
Mm.
and that these things are out there. So, yeah, that's a really good reminder.
Mhm.
And before we finish, I know you mentioned breath work there as the second one. Is there a breath that, do you have like a go-to breath that if you think, "Oh, I just need to calm down, I need to take a minute," what would you recommend? And could you teach us something for people that maybe haven't done this before?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is the most simplest breath of all. It is just a breath where we use our entire body, full body breathing, a full belly
Hmm.
breath. So, first of all, to get this breath, you want to make sure that you're sitting up nice and
I'm
tall.
going to join in because I feel like I need one.
Yes. And you want to make sure that
Right.
your spine is like nice and long so that you can really expand into the whole body. Relax your shoulders
Hmm.
down, closing down the eyes. And just relax the muscles in your face, soften your jawline, remove the tongue away from the roof of your mouth, relax your eyelids and your eyebrows. If your hands are gripping your knees or on your lap, just soften your hands. And especially ladies, we all hug our belly in. So if you're sucking your belly in right now, just let your belly muscles relax. And then you want to imagine your torso is segmented into 3 parts. So you have the lower section, which is around the belly button and the diaphragm area. Then you have the middle section, which is where your lungs and your rib cage are. And then you have the upper section, which is your chest and your collarbones. And when you inhale, you want to push your belly muscles out and you want to fill up that lower section first. So you want your belly button area and your diaphragm to expand. And then as you continue the inhale, you want to fill all the way up to the lungs and the rib cage. And then finalize the inhale all the way up to the collarbone. Even if you feel like you can't take any more in, just imagine you can take it in and then just briefly hold. And then when you exhale, start to exhale from the collarbones out through the nose. Then from the ribs, exhale all the way down to the belly button. We're going to do 2 more of that. So inhale, push your belly muscles out, fill up the lower sections, fill up the middle section, fill up the upper section, briefly hold, and then exhale upper section, exhale middle section, exhale lower section. Really squeeze your navel back, really empty out the exhale. One more time, inhale, lower section, expand the belly, inhale, middle section, expand the rib cage, inhale, upper section, expand the chest, exhale from the collarbones, exhale, keep going down past the ribs, and then finish the exhale by squeezing the navel back. And then just let the breath go and come back. And just, 3 deep breaths. That's all it takes normally to just instantly change. How do you feel?
Oh, it's so much more relaxed. I'm just like, why don't I do this more often? You just forget, don't you? You need to just, it's a real practice of trying to build things into your life. Just trying to introduce, maybe one thing at a time that you can, even just if you could introduce a breath a couple of times a day, it would make a big difference. I'm sure it would.
Yeah, it really would. Instantly. Instant shift, an internal state,
Mm,
and very quick.
yeah. Yeah. Well, that is brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing all that knowledge and practical ways that people can work with fear and feel more in control.
Thank you so much
I think,
for having me.
oh, you're very welcome. And I think just like a final message for people is really just to remember that feeling fear is human, but it really doesn't have to be the thing that dominates your life. It's just about finding the right tools, finding the right support, and then you can feel a lot safer and more at ease with yourself. So if you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone that might benefit from it. We would love for you to follow and to leave a review because that helps more people find this content. And until next time, stay safe.